We have breaking news. Hey, how's it going, everyone? Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. On the East Coast, it's 1:45. I'm in the Indiana Convention Center in Radio Row at the Combine. I got Mike Silver, not a guest of mine, but just sort of hanging over my left shoulder talking to Greg Papa and his son. I'm over here by myself, and we have breaking news. First, well, I'm going to get into the Deebo Samuel breaking news because that's what the story's about. This show is called The Commanders and Texans Want to Trade for Deebo Samuel, and that's what we're going to talk about. But first, Matthew Stafford has just signed to stay with the Rams. So this affects the 49ers. You might have been thinking, hey, Stafford could leave. They could replace him with a rookie or Aaron Rodgers and his malcontent self, and that would be good news for the 49ers. But no, Rams worked it out. This is not really great news for the 49ers, although I don't know if the Rams really wanted to give him all this money, but they did. And what I think was interesting is I never understood why the Raiders would be interested in Stafford to begin with. I mean, they're awful. And just adding Matthew Stafford wouldn't make them not awful. They would still be awful with Matthew Stafford because he'd be throwing to Brock Bowers and that's it. So they're a team that's years away from being years away from being years away from being good. And adding a 37-year-old quarterback and giving him $100 million guarantee didn't make any sense. So, not that I care what they do. Let me make that real clear. I don't care what the Raiders do, but I think it's good that they didn't trade for Stafford. And I do think it's interesting that the Rams have inked a deal with Stafford. We'll see the details on it, but maybe that gives the Niners somewhat of a framework for what the deal could be with Brock Purdy. I'm trying to see some numbers on it, but I don't see any. If anyone has numbers on the Matthew Stafford deal, let me know because that'll give us a bit of a framework on what the Brock Purdy deal could be. But again, if you're just tuning in, Stafford to stay in LA, the whole thing with the Raiders was a bunch of hooey nonsense. There's no way the Raiders were going to make that move. It was stupid for them. It was stupid for Stafford. This was a bunch of drama for nothing. So let's get into some real news. The Commanders and the Texans want Deebo Samuel, according to Jordan Schultz. Deebo's on the trade block, and these are two teams that know him. DeMeco Ryans was with the Niners, knows Deebo. Adam Peters with the Niners, knows Deebo. DeMeco, of course, is the head coach of the Houston Texans, and Adam Peters, the general manager of the Washington Commanders. This is interesting to me because I felt with Deebo, it could go one of two ways. If people really have a lot of confidence in Kyle Shanahan, they might think, well, if it won't work with Kyle, then it won't work with me. If Kyle's out on Deebo and it's not working there anymore, why would I do better? I look up to Kyle. I admire Kyle. But this seems to almost be two of his former colleagues saying, you know what? I understand the issue between those two guys. And it seems to be a dynamic between those two guys. And Deebo will work with me. You bring him into a different locker room with a different head coach, and Deebo will play hard. Deebo will be an impact player. Maybe that's not true, but it seems like that's the perception the Commanders and the Texans have. And I just think that's really interesting that DeMeco and Adam Peters seem to think that they can succeed where Kyle Shanahan has failed. I wonder what Adam Peters and DeMeco Ryans really think privately of Kyle Shanahan. I'm sure they have a lot of respect for him, but I think they may be thinking they can profit from Kyle Shanahan's botched relationship. Now, it was reported that Deebo was 20 pounds overweight this year. That would, I would think, turn off a lot of teams, scare teams. But if they're thinking, well, that's just because he doesn't respect Kyle Shanahan, and I was there and I've seen it. I was in the organization. I know he doesn't really respect Kyle. Kyle doesn't challenge him. Kyle treats him like a friend. Kyle doesn't really – the only person who ever challenged him in the organization was Wes Welker, who left 4 years ago. Bring him over here. We'll have a different locker room. I'll challenge him. And Deebo wants to be challenged. He doesn't want a friend. He doesn't respect – I mean, maybe that's how they feel. I didn't know which way it would go. But it seems like people who know Deebo, people who know Kyle, They want in on this. And that would make John Lynch, if I were John Lynch, I'd feel uneasy. Okay, so we're trading a guy to our former defensive coordinator, to my former assistant GM, and they want him, and they think you mismanaged him. Are you sure you're wrong? Are you sure they're wrong? Kind of scary. Because the thing about Deebo Samuel, even though he was just awful in 2024, he was excellent in 2023. And if he could go to another team and lose 20 pounds and stay in shape, that would look really bad on the Niners. It would look like they're ineffective. Like players just stop respecting them after a while. I mean, maybe that's not the case. So maybe this is good news for the Niners. Maybe they trade Deebo Samuel to some naive team that stuck in the past, has some idea of what Deebo Samuel was 2-3 years ago and holding on to that. Maybe they trade Deebo Samuel for a 4th, 5th round pick to some team that's going to learn the hard way about what Deebo Samuel is at this point in his career, and the Niners will win this. Maybe this is good news. But it would make me think twice. Adam Peters wants him? Damn. He hasn't talked himself out of Deebo? Damn. D'Amico has a pretty good read of people. At least former players. So, look, it is interesting. The backdrop of all this, John Lynch said at the Combine a few days ago that the Niners need to recalibrate their roster, reset it, because they've spent so much cash the last 8 years. Number 2 in cash spending the last 8 years. So what do we know? We know that they have tighter constraints financially, according to John Lynch. That was his phrase. The Yorks are exploring selling a 10% stake in their ownership, and they're trading off stars. Another wide receiver they could trade, Brandon Ayuk. Now, this is interesting. There was a report a few days ago that teams were poking around about trading for Ayuk, and you just go online and look at Ayuk's contract and look at the salary cap penalties the Niners would take on by trading Ayuk in the near future, and it just seems ridiculous. Like they're not going to hurt themselves that much in terms of salary cap to move him. But salary cap isn't like real. I mean, it's real, but it's not cash. It's just what you're allowed to spend on your team. Trading Ayuk would get the Niners out of paying him any more cash. And he has a lot more cash due on his contract. And it seems like the Niners are trying to pare back spending. So when asked about would they trade Ayuk, Lynch didn't walk that back at all. He was like, yeah, you get calls like that a lot and you listen. And the reason we're listening is because we spent too much money and we have to recalibrate and we have to reset. And that's some hard decisions. That's what he said. So not only is Deebo out on the way out, it looks like Ayuk could be on the way out as well. In which case, the Niners wide receivers would be Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings. And the thing about that is Jawan Jennings will be a free agent next year, and I don't know if the Niners will bring him back. So suddenly, wide receiver is looking like a big position of need and something the Niners really could take in round 1. Going back to Deebo for a second, let's say they trade him to Washington. They could trade him for a pick, or what's interesting about Washington, they have a defensive tackle, former first-round pick Jonathan Allen, who requested a trade recently. So sometimes teams could flip disgruntled veteran getting phased out for disgruntled veteran getting phased out. And we know the Niners desperately need a defensive tackle because they traded 3 first-round picks and a 3rd for Trey Lance and got nothing and are suffering the consequences of that deal because one of those picks probably would have been a hell of a defensive tackle, and they gave it away. So, yeah, that's where they stand. They are suffering the consequences of their prior decisions. They almost certainly have to take a defensive tackle with their first pick, but if they trade Ayuk and Deebo, they may need a wide receiver as well. They could trade Deebo to Washington for Jonathan Allen straight up. Deebo goes to Washington, loses 15 pounds, and becomes the, yak specialist, flanker, slot guy to complement their split end Terry McLaurin. If he's in shape, it works. If he's at his best, you put him in a zone read RPO offense with Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury, it just might work. On the flip side, if the Niners get Jonathan Allen, now they don't necessarily have to draft a defensive tackle in round one. They still could, right? They could have their starting defensive tackles be Jonathan Allen and a first-round pick. Certainly. I think that might even be a better option for the 49ers than getting a day 3 pick. This is an older team that needs starters. They're committed to making another run with this older team. And a 4th or 5th round pick may not start on this team, although it might. But getting Jonathan Allen couldn't hurt. That would be an interesting trade. And then for Ayuk, I don't know who ultimately would want him. Maybe the teams that were interested in him last year. I mean, if you wanted Ayuk last year, you could get him now for 20% of the price. If you're offering a late first or early second for Ayuk, maybe you offer a 5th for him now, and the Niners would be inclined to trade him just to not pay him any more cash, just to get out from a negative valued asset, right? I think that's what they're looking at. That's a negative valued asset. He's never going to be worth the money they pay him for a lot of reasons. Even if he hadn't torn his knee up, he probably never would have been worth the money they paid him, but they could fantasize about a future where he gets a bunch of targets in a different system on a different team. Now that future is not going to come. So they're probably just going to walk away from the investment. And if they get anything for it, that's a bonus. So they're in this position. They're coming here to the combine, and in one sense, they're in a great spot because they don't want a quarterback in round 1. And there are 2 quarterbacks that are going to go in the top 10 who certainly wouldn't have gone in the top 10 last year. Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders. Maybe one of them is going to be really good. I think Cam Ward's pretty good. But these are guys that would have been 2nd round picks last year. So they're going to go top 10, and that means that at 11, the Niners almost certainly will get a top 10 prospect. It's great news. Problem is, the best player available for the Niners could be a tight end. Tyler Warren from Penn State, Colston Loveland from Michigan, or it could be a running back, Ashton Genty from Boise State, or it could be a wide receiver. And you always want to take the best player available, but technically those positions I just listed, maybe not the wide receiver because the Niners really do need one if they trade their 2 starters. But let's say they want to take one of the tight ends or the running back. Those are what you call luxury picks. And if the Niners hadn't traded 3 firsts and a 3rd for Trey Lance and they had spent those draft picks wisely, then they could take that tight end there. But the Niners don't have the luxury of taking a tight end in round 1 because they've neglected the trenches for so long. The Niners really do have to draft for need. And it's their fault. They painted themselves in this corner. They can't just say, you know what? It doesn't matter that we screwed up all our final previous drafts. We're not even going to acknowledge the past. We're just going to take this tight end and say he was BPA. No, they can't do that. Because that's like a glitzy pick when you need meat and potatoes. It's like you're malnourished, you're starving, and you go to Safeway and get dessert. You can't do it. We need meat and potatoes here. Oatmeal. You got to draft oatmeal in round 1. No luxury pick. The one I will say, though, let's talk about wide receiver. So if the Niners trade Ayuk away, which they should and probably will, Deebo's gone. Deebo's been replaced. Pearsall is the new Deebo, the starting Z receiver who can move into the slot. Ayuk was the split end. That's a guy who can line up in a 3-by-1 formation. You have your bunch of 3 receivers to one side and your split receiver to the other side. That was never Deebo. That was Ayuk, a guy who can win one-on-one against a guy, the top corner on the team, playing press man coverage. It's not Deebo. It's not Pearsall. It's Ayuk. And when Ayuk went down, it became Jennings. And Jennings had a hell of a year, but let's face it, he's not really a true X receiver because an X receiver needs to threaten a defense vertically. And Jennings doesn't. Now, he can run deep and jump and maybe make a contested catch 25 yards downfield, but he's the slowest wide receiver in football. He's much better in the slot. Much better in the slot. Hell of a player, though. So if the Niners trade Ayuk, they really do have a need for an X receiver, a split end. And I don't know that the top split end in the draft will be available for the 49ers. But if he is, I think Kyle Shanahan is going to have a very hard time not taking him, even though they need a defensive lineman, because it's Kyle, and this guy's incredible. Ted McMillan, call him T-Mac from Arizona. He's that good. I've seen him talk. I've watched his film. I've talked to people about him. He's the real deal. He is a young Mike Evans, not Calvin Johnson, but a young Mike Evans. He's 6'5". He has an incredible catch radius. He's fast. He could be a true X receiver. He could replace Brandon Ayuk. He could replace Jawan Jennings, and I think he's a great fit with Brock Purdy, who is a terrific quarterback. But what makes him terrific is his combination of skills, how he's more of a dual threat than you give him credit for. He's not Drew Brees, a guy who stands in one place and has immaculate, incredible ball placement. That's not really Brock Purdy. I mean, he's not Joe Montana hitting people like in an exact spot in the jersey between the numbers 2 feet out in front. That's not Brock Purdy. He benefits from wide receivers and tight ends who have bigger catch radiuses and can adjust a little bit to a pass that's a little high or a little behind. And there's no shame in that. And that's why he is so prone to throw to Jennings or Kittle. Those have been his favorite targets. And even Ayuk, although he's 6 foot tall, has the arm length of someone who's 6'5". So consistently, even going back to college when Brock Purdy was with Iowa State, he's always been very comfortable throwing downfield to much bigger targets. So if T-Mac, Ted McMillan, is there at number 11, I just don't see how Kyle Shanahan could resist. And if he doesn't and he takes him, I'd even probably give him a good grade, even though, once again, it's a bit of a luxury pick and you need to be addressing the trenches. He's just that freaking good. Something to think about. Although, maybe fortunately for the 49ers, I think he's so good that he probably won't be there at pick 11. Him, the cornerback Will Johnson, just great players that you don't really need, but they play premium positions. And if they're there at 11, it's like, man, I got to take this seriously. But I don't think either player will be there at 11, which means the Niners can focus on meat and potatoes in round 1. And the question is, do they go interior first or edge first? I think it's fair to assume they're going to go defensive line. They don't really want to draft offensive line early. They say Trent Williams is coming back. I don't think they really want to draft offensive tackles. They had some bad experiences there. Most of them are just so overmatched by defensive ends anyway. I mean, how many good offensive tackles are there really in the NFL? Guys who don't get flagged every game for holding. So let's think it through. They could take a defensive tackle. Those guys are hard to find. Big dudes who are good against the pass and the run. The top defensive tackles in this draft are Walter Nolan and Mason Graham, who are both outstanding prospects, 3-down players. But I think they would get exposed on the 49ers because of the wide 9 defense. And let me just put it this way. This is no knock on them at all. I think they're great prospects. I think Aaron Donald in his prime would get exposed on the 49ers in their wide 9 defense. And if you disagree with me, I guess we just have a fundamental disagreement. But in a wide 9, when you move those defensive ends outside the tight end and those defensive tackles, there's so much space between those players. If you're 285, you're going to get moved around by double teams all day in the run game. You could split some of them sometimes. Aaron Donald, the greatest player ever, arguably one of them. Even in a wide 9, would find a few opportunities to make some plays and split some double teams. But overall, it would be a horrible fit for him. He'd complain, and the defensive coordinator would get fired, and they'd bring in a 5-man front because that's what he fits. That's what he always played in. That's what Justin Smith played in as a defensive tackle for the 49ers. I don't think Justin Smith would have been a good fit in the wide 9 because in the wide 9, there's so much space. I asked John Lynch, what are you looking for? He said, Grant's a good question because there's so much space between the players, right? To me, you need space eaters. Big freaking dudes. Javon Hargrave, not a space eater. You know who were space eaters? Buckner and Armstead. 6'7", 6'8", guys who have long arms, who can two-gap if necessary. Because think about it. If you're going to play 2 deep safeties, that means you have 7 in the box. that means you're outnumbered. That means one of those players in the box needs to play two gaps. One of them. And when Buckner and Armstead were here, it could be either one. They could take turns on it on different plays. Now, there's no two-gapper in the 49ers front seven, which is one reason their run defense is so awful. Kinlaw was supposed to be in that mold. 6'5", 320, long arms. I mean, he has the frame. He could be that space eater in the wide nine, but he had injury issues. I mean, his knee was an issue when they drafted him. He couldn't really anchor as a result. You watched him. He would try to sort of anchor on his one leg that was healthy. I mean, what was he supposed to do? It was just a poor medical evaluation, but that's sort of the prototype of what they're looking for. So if they can find that guy in round one, okay. Maybe it's Derek Harmon who went to Oregon. Maybe another tall, big body, long arm guy who can two gap sometimes is the pick there. But I'm kind of thinking they're going to lean towards the edge rusher in round one. And I don't really know why. I just feel like if it's not Graham or Nolan are worth that 11th pick, but I don't know if they fit the Niners defense for better or worse. So if the Niners take a different D tackle in round one, is it a reach to take Kenneth Grant there or Derek Harmon? Maybe. If they feel the top two D tackles in the draft aren't the best scheme fits for them because they're not space eaters, and they would get moved around like they have to learn from the Hargrave experience, right? What do they learn from the Hargrave experience? Just getting a menace of an interior pass rusher who can win one-on-one matchups and is nearly impossible to block one-on-one and gives you a real advantage on pass rushing downs isn't necessarily an impact player on this defense. I mean, I think Hargrave did he do more bad than good? Or was he just a wash? So they got to learn from that experience and not bring in the next Hargrave. So that's why I'd be nervous about any sub 300-pound defensive tackle who's, 6'2", 6'3". There's exceptions, but I wouldn't want to do that. So let's go edge rusher in round one. Let's say edge rusher in round one, defensive tackle in round two. You could get a space eater in round two. Round one, Abdul Carter's the best, but he's going to go maybe with the top pick. Then you got Jalen Walker from Georgia. And, I've been hanging out with Brooks, who covers the Georgia football team on SI. And Brooks Austin, you should check him out. Brooks Austin covers Georgia football for on SI. And I was asking him a lot about their players because he knows them. Jalen Walker, this is what he says about Jalen Walker. Son of a coach, will be a coach one day, football guy, brilliant football mind. So right away, he fits what the Niners look for. Robert Saleh would geek out talking to him about football. And if you're committed to using him in two positions, then he'd be a good pick. But to move him to one position full time, he's not necessarily a great inside linebacker, although he's built like one. And he's not necessarily a great edge rusher, although he plays that sometimes. So if you want to say he's this or that, he's gonna replace Greenlaw, he's gonna replace Leonard Floyd. He's kind of a unique player who needs to do a little bit of both, and his versatility is what makes him good. I don't think the Niners are going to take him. The other Georgia edge rusher might be more up their alley. Mykel Williams. Jalen Walker, to be like a good run defender, would need to be playing inside linebacker. He couldn't be a good run defender as a defensive end. Mykel Williams is 6'5", 260 with long arms. Mykel Williams is a phenomenal run defender on the end. He's the best edge run defender in the class. And the Niners haven't really had, he'd be a better edge run defender than Nick Bosa. Right off the bat. So he has a prototypical size, great on first and second down, and he was a starter as a freshman on the best team in the country, the national champion Georgia Bulldogs. So was Ladd McConkey. So was Brock Bowers. This is a guy with serious pedigree who was playing at the highest level his first year in college. And it's like, well, he didn't have the sack numbers. He had No, it never had more than 5 sacks in a season. But that's true of every defensive lineman who goes to Georgia. And those guys are all really freaking good in the NFL. In addition, Michael in particular was playing a lot of 4-eye technique, which means just inside the offensive tackle. I mean, yeah, that's almost like a 3-4 defensive tackle. He was playing a lot at Georgia, according to Brooks Austin. And if he could hold up doing that, like playing 4-eye technique at 260 pounds, that's why I compare him to Aldon Smith. I mean, he doesn't have the sack numbers that Aldon Smith had in college, but Aldon Smith also played some defensive tackle at Missouri. Maybe you don't remember the Aldon Smith film, but that was my first year covering the team. Like, he was that size. He could play with his hand in the dirt, D end or D tackle, and he was really good against the run and violent. And that's kind of what Michael Williams reminds me of. So that might be I don't really see anything wrong with that pick. The other one that's interesting is James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee. He's 6'5", 245. So he's a full 15 pounds lighter than Michael Williams. Not going to be the run defender that Michael Williams is, but he ran a 4.47. It's incredible. I mean, he moves like a wide receiver. He's 6'5", 245. He ran a 4.47. Like, tight ends won't be doing that. He moves like a freaking wide receiver, and he had big-time sack production in college. I could absolutely see the Niners taking James Pierce Jr. With the 11th pick if he's there, because Robert Saleh just a couple of years ago when he was with the Jets took Will McDonald IV with the 15th pick, and he's like 239 pounds. This guy's better than Will McDonald IV. So if Robert Saleh has a big say on who they take on defense, particularly in the first round, I could see them taking one of those two guys, one of the DNs. And I don't know if this really factors in, but I think the Niners should have some self-awareness that they've tried drafting defensive tackle. They've made some very large investments in the defensive tackle position since John and Kyle have been here. They drafted Solomon Thomas in round 1. They drafted Javon Kinlaw in round 1. They signed Javon Hargrave to a 4-year, $184 million deal. None of those moves worked out. So they're 0 for 3 in big swings. 3 big swings, 3 big misses at the defensive tackle position. Maybe that's enough. Maybe from now on, you look for defensive tackles in later rounds, because, again, you run this funky, weird system, and a lot of good D tackles aren't going to fit it. So if you're looking for space eaters, and that's to me, in this system, run defense at defensive tackle is more important than pass rush, because if you can't stop the run, if you can't anchor, if you can't eat up double teams, if you don't demand a double team and then eat it up, you're not stopping the run. And if you're not stopping the run, you're not rushing the quarterback and you're losing. So if you really need space eaters, take that dude in round 2. Who's the guy? Hold on. I should know these. Who's the dude from Ohio State, the defensive tackle? I'm going to get his name. Tyleek, which is a good name, but I forget his last name. CBS. Help me out. His name is Tyleek Williams. He's 6'3", 327. There's a space eater. Kenneth Grant, 6'3", 339. There's a space eater. I mean, you need him to be able to push the pocket as well. And if you want more dynamic 3 technique interior pass rushers, then get rid of the fucking wide 9. How about that? But all due respect, Robert Saleh likes it. I respect Robert Saleh. I'll roll with him. This is what you want to do, then you got to make it work. Round 2, I'm thinking Tyleek Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State. They could go with a luxury pick, but I don't think they have that luxury. I think they got to go trenches, round 1 and round 2. Should they go offensive line? Yes. Will they? No. I don't think they want to take an offensive tackle. They haven't drafted one in 4 years. I think they're going to keep that going. I think they'll draft a guard, but probably later, round 3. Because they drafted Pooney last year, and they really do need multiple starters on the defensive line. So I'm thinking Pierce or Michael Williams in round 1, and then Tyleek Williams in round 2. And now you got 2 new starters on your defensive line. You trade Deebo Samuel for Jonathan Allen. That's 3 new starters on your defensive line. Now you got a D line. I kind of like that. Now, your offensive line is still mediocre at best. But once again, this is the position the Niners have put themselves in. There's no way they come out of this draft with all their needs fulfilled. You can't undo the problem that the Trey Lance trade created. You can't undo that. You just have to live with the fallout for years. But you can start slowly addressing it. And that's what we're doing with the first 2 picks. D-line. This is what the Rams did last year. They lost Aaron Donald. Their D-line was their strength. It became a weakness, and now it's a strength again. They did it in 2 drafts. This past draft, they finished it. They drafted Jared Verse in round 1. They drafted Braden Fiskey in round 2. Boom, boom. Defensive end in round 1. Defensive tackle in round 2. Need addressed. I think the Niners will do the same thing because the Niners are a copycat team. Whatever the Rams do, the Niners do. Sean McVay stops going to the combine. Kyle stops going to the combine. You ever notice that? So I'm looking at a space eater D tackle. Sue me. Tyleik Williams, I like him. Also, Darius Alexander moved so freaking well in the combine. He's 6'4", 310. Is that big enough? Does he eat enough space? How does one eat space? Alfred Collins, space eater, 6'5", 320. Final thing I want to say, and then I'll take a bunch of super chats. When I say a bunch, I have 4. So, yeah, they got to get an offensive lineman. I would imagine they'll take a guard. They have 2 third-round picks. So, best guard available in round 3. I don't really have an opinion yet. The offensive linemen talk tomorrow and then work out on Sunday. So, I'll have a better feel for them coming up. What I want to say is, we talk about Ayuk, Deebo, Purdy. Still, the most important player on this team is Christian McCaffrey. Most important player on this team. When he's good, they're great. When he's out, they're not good. And that's been that way since 2022. And I know a lot of people want to feel like last year was a fluke and it's behind him and he'll be great and dominant once again. I don't expect that. I'm open to being incorrect. I don't expect Christian McCaffrey to once again carry this team the way he did for a season and a half. I think those days are behind him. I think his body's beginning to break down, and I think they're not going to have him for extended periods anymore. And I think what's tough about that is you don't know how much you're going to have him, but you do know that when you don't have him, your offense falls apart. Why? Because even though you have running backs on the team who can run it, Mason, great runner. Garendo, hell of a runner. Both of these guys average damn near 6 yards a carry, more than 5. What makes the 49ers offense work, what makes it deadly, especially with Brock Purdy at quarterback, is the running back who can catch passes out of the backfield. Because without that, Brock Purdy all of a sudden is leading the league in air yards per attempt and forcing passes downfield, really forcing passes that his arm shouldn't be making. Whereas in the past, he could just dump the ball behind the line of scrimmage to Christian McCaffrey, who can make a guy or two miss, and it's 8 yards. It made Brock better. It made Kyle better. And I think after seeing what the offense looked like for a season without that element, you can bet your bottom dollar they're adding that player to this team. They're not going to go into another season with the possibility that Christian could miss some or all of it, and they'll have the offense they had this year. I think they'll be more cavalier about the left tackle position than they will about the running back position. Trent, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. They're not going to say that with Christian McCaffrey. They're going to draft the running back no later than round 3. They could take him in round 2. I'm praying they won't because, again, they don't have that luxury. That would be a luxury, freaking running back in round 2. But round 3, yeah. And I don't know who it's going to be, but it's going to be someone who's very good at catching passes, who can run some of the same routes that McCaffrey runs and command some of the same attention. Is that Cam Scottyboo? I don't know. I kind of think Cam Scottyboo would be better as like a use check replacement, but any back who can catch passes in the backfield is someone the Niners not only need to look at, will look at, probably will trade up for. Garendo has some of that skill set, but he couldn't really replace it. He could run a wheel route, but he's not the same type of receiver as McCaffrey. They're going to look to replace that. Maybe they'll do it in free agency, but I freaking guarantee they're putting that skill set on this team because they're a mediocre team without it. All right, let's take some super chats. Aziz for Deebo. Never going to happen because Aziz is a cornerstone of that team. All day, every day, Kim says, Grant, do you think Kyle would have pushed so hard for big money wide receiver signings if he really believed Brock can carry this team? I don't really care what Kyle thinks, though. What's his track record judging quarterbacks? Right? I mean, Kyle's as lost as we are when it comes to quarterbacks, even if it's his quarterback. I mean, if he's really so concerned about what Brock needs, give him a freaking offensive line, but he won't. You feel me? Ryan Hatfield says Deebo will get cut and will wait to see where Doug Peterson gets a job. He will choose ice cream bowls over Super Bowls. I don't really get the reference. Doug Peterson and ice cream. You think Doug Peterson's getting a job? Anyway, LouTube says we want to see GC and DL interact for high-quality draft content. Okay, me too. I'm trying to get him to do a show with me, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like he wants to, and I don't understand why. I feel like I've only been nice to him, so I'll keep trying. You guys should go onto his streams and say, stream with Grant. I mean, I'm just trying to help him out. He's an up-and-comer. I've got about 100,000 more subscribers than him. I'm trying to help him. Put him on the map. You know what I mean? Let more people know who, because a lot of people, when you see DL, you're like, who is that? I don't understand, and I get that. All day, every day, Kim says, Niners copycat Rams except for winning. There is that. The Niners didn't copy that part of the formula. It's an important part, the finishing part. But you could argue a big reason, the main reason the Rams have a Super Bowl victory is because they got to face the Niners in the NFC Championship game, and the Niners did that thing they do where they have a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and lose. You know? If the Rams had faced anyone else in the NFC Championship game, maybe they lose that game, considering they weren't really didn't play well that day until the very end. But that's hypothetical. Me donates $50. I feel like I should do something if someone donates that much to like encourage it. But anyway, Meath says, even as a Hawks fan, I appreciate your insight and passion, man. Keep up the hard work. Have a nice meal on me. Jesus, man. Thank you very much. Can I just say that freaking Seahawks fans are way nicer than you ingrate Niner fans? How come none of you Niner fans gave me a meal? Ingrates. No, I love you guys. Thank you very much. I like that Seahawks fans like me too, though. That's nice. Appreciate it. Joseph for real. $9.99, also extremely generous, says, I think eating space is most important, being inner space. Eat your ego and transcend. Overconsumption of outer space is a bad BS belief system. When you can do both, you're an unstoppable D lineman. I'm going to read that again because, I mean, I think it goes without saying, but I think we should say it one more time. I think eating space is most important, being inner space. Eat your ego and transcend. Overconsumption of outer space is a bad belief system. When you can do both, you're an unstoppable D lineman. That's true. Thank you, Joseph, for real. All day, every day, Kim says David needs to put away his Brock knee pads. I'm not really sure what that refers to or what that means. Are there knee pads with Brock's face on it? Is that what you're talking? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'm pretty much done. It was interesting today, the quarterbacks talk. And, I wasn't really filming them anymore because you're so far back and the audio is terrible. But I was watching. I just wanted to get an impression of them. And I really like Jalen Milroe. I still like Jalen Milroe a lot. Here's my thing with the quarterbacks in this draft class. It's a terrible draft class. And it's possible that there won't be any starters. Maybe Cam Ward will be a starter. Maybe Shadur Sanders will be a starter. I think Cam Ward will be a good starter. But after that, there could be no starters in this draft. So when you're looking at Jackson Dart or Kyle McCord or Quinn Ewers, to me, you're looking like, yeah, that looks like a nice backup. That's what you're looking for. It's a deep class of backup quarterbacks. And there's Jalen Milroe, who's obviously a backup quarterback, someone who should not be starting year one, maybe year two, maybe year three, but he, in an awful draft class, I would argue, he has the highest upside because he's by far the best runner. He's an explosive runner. There are no other explosive runners at quarterback in this draft class. And what I liked about him is he's so mature, and he's not trying to be like a crossover star like Shadur Sanders. This is the quarterback at Alabama. He understands the responsibility of the position and the pressure of being in the spotlight in ways that I don't know that Cam Ward does. Not saying he's better than Cam Ward, but I like his makeup. I like his athleticism. I like his rushing ability. And I like the way he explains the quarterback position. It's like what he wants to do is not be one-dimensional. And it's like he's using my vocabulary. I love this. There are some quarterbacks who are really good at passing the ball. There are some quarterbacks who are really good at running the ball. He wants to be good at both. And I feel like not enough quarterbacks say things like that because it's always been you got to win from the pocket. Yeah, running's fine, but you don't want to do too much of it. And you just want to scramble here and there. But really, passing is so much more important than running. Not for young quarterbacks. Not in today's NFL. Today's NFL, defenses are playing two high safeties every snap to take away the explosive plays. They're daring you to run the ball. I mean, you've seen so many teams have so much success with young quarterbacks who don't pass that much. Lamar doesn't pass a lot. Josh Allen doesn't pass a lot. Jaden Daniels doesn't pass a lot. Jalen Hurts doesn't pass a lot. They run. And when they pass, they're very effective in short bursts. 18 attempts a game, 22 attempts a game, 25. That's it. And I think teams should be looking for people who could develop into quarterbacks like that. Because even if you have the best passer in the league, if he doesn't run, he's one-dimensional. Yes, everyone would love Tom Brady. But I don't think there's ever going to be another Tom Brady. Someone who can stand still, get the ball, know what the defense is going to do before they do it, and get the ball out of their hands before it gets touched. I don't think you're ever going to see another guy like that again. Tom Brady is the ideal quarterback. Sure, absolutely. But he was one-dimensional, and you're never going to see anyone out Tom Brady what Tom Brady did. Justin Herbert's a great passer. He's one-dimensional. And when that one dimension breaks down, the whole team's screwed. So instead of drafting a one-dimensional backup quarterback, why don't you take a dual threat and give yourself a chance to have the ultimate weapon in football? Doesn't mean he'll work out, but he's not going to go in round one. He might not even go in round two. I mean, instead of taking Cam Scattyboo, you could take him, play him at freaking running back for a year. I mean, he could be your offensive weapon. I just get so excited thinking about all the different ways I would use him. I mean, I'm just going to geek out on him for a second. I know I'm like losing all my viewers because no one gives a damn about this quarterback who's not going to be on the Niners, but this dude ran for 20 touchdowns last year. 20. He just ran for them. The Niners can't score in the red zone. Just saying. Can you imagine? They might have to score touchdowns if the guy were on the team. Anyway, he was here. He talked. I liked listening to him talk. He seemed very mature. The other guy who was interesting, Dylan Gabriel. He's very short. Quarterback from Oregon, but he's also very smart, very experienced, lefty, and a big-time scrambler. He rushed for 19 touchdowns the last 2 years. I think the Niners will end up getting him. Him or the Dolphins. Excuse me, the Niners or the Dolphins will end up getting that Dylan Gabriel guy. It seems like the Niners style of quarterback. They would never draft Jalen Milroe in a million years. The Niners wouldn't. But they'd take a guy like Dylan Gabriel. And he just might be really good. I don't know. He seems like he'd be a good backup for the Niners. I kind of like him, even though he's not even 5'11". He's probably as tall as Kyler Murray. So there's, he's got that going for him. All right, guys. I think that's all I got. Thanks for watching. It's 2:30 over here on the east. That's not the East Coast, but in the Eastern time zone. I'm gonna finish posting my articles and videos for the day. And will I go to Lucas Oil Stadium and watch? Will I go? Will I go? Will I go? Will I go? No, I won't. No, I will not. I don't think it's boring. I think you get more out of watching the combine on TV than in person. Tomorrow, I might want to go just to watch Jalen Milroe throw in person, just for moral support. Because he knows I'm watching, man. He knows I'm his number one fan. I don't think he could perform his best if I'm not there. I want him to feel supported. So I'll go for Jalen tomorrow. But yeah, today I think I'll probably hang around here behind where the security guards are because I don't trust anyone anymore. Got my head in a swivel at all times. Kidding? Also, no one's staying. I'm staying till Monday here. Everyone's leaving tomorrow or tonight because they knew better. I'm all in. I'm the most dedicated person in the NFL. Easily. Okay. I'm done. Thanks for watching. And I'll be back soon. Enjoy that combine.